Good morning. These are your BYU-Idaho radio morning headlines for Thursday, May 15th, 2025. Thanks for listening. I'm Jill Clary. A local husband and father of 6 miraculously lived to tell his story of survival after his 1-ton truck fell on him. According to EastIdahoNews.com, Casey Price of Osgood was working on his truck at home on April 24th. Price grew up dairy farming and has experience working on semis and machine equipment through the years. He had his 19-foot enclosed trailer hooked onto his truck at the time. Quote, "I drove up into the driveway and drove my truck into the garage," Casey recalled. "The garage slopes down a little bit, but my driveway, when you go out, starts to slope down a lot faster," unquote. He used 2 jack stands to raise his truck up enough for him to climb underneath it to work. He says the parking brake was on, chocks were on place, and he thought everything was good. So he started undrilling the bearing casing. But he said as he was drilling it out, he realized it wasn't the right casing, and that's when the casing and driveline snapped out of place. Casey said it snapped out of place with such force that it knocked the jack stands and chocks out, put the transmission in neutral, and caused the truck to fall. He caught the truck for about 3 seconds before it came too much to bear, and he had to let go. Casey was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered he had 13 broken ribs, and the other ribs that weren't broken, the tendons had torn. One of Casey's broken ribs punctured his lung and his sternum was free-floating, but he had no internal bleeding. Laura Price says the surgeon had never seen this type of injury, just to the ribs and nothing else. A plane carrying dozens of South Africans landed in the United States on Monday. 9 of them will be resettling in Idaho as refugees, making them some of the only refugees to come to Idaho since President Donald Trump ordered pauses in January. The Washington Post reports that nearly 50 Afrikaners, a term that refers to South Africans descended from Dutch settlers, were flown on a U.S.-funded charter plane as part of a Trump decision that landed at Washington Dulles International Airport on Monday morning. According to EastIdahoNews.com, the move meant the Trump administration prioritized the South Africans ahead of about 12,000 already approved refugees, including more than 400 who had been poised to resettle in Idaho this year, according to the Idaho Office for Refugees. A January executive order brought their hopes to a screeching halt, despite some of them being so far along in the process that they already had plane tickets to Boise. The Idaho Office for Refugees says only a handful of refugees who had an approved special immigrant visa for helping the U.S. military have entered Idaho since the order. Several months after a life-altering surgery that fused her partially severed skull to the rest of her body, Emily Farmer is back in action making soap and other products through her business venture. The 33-year-old Rigby woman launched the Blooming Goat in 2023. She sells homemade soap, lotion, and lip balm made from goat milk. A car crash in 2019 left Farmer unable to do simple tasks without experiencing a lot of pain. Through a specialist in Maryland, she eventually discovered 50% of her head was not attached to her body. In March, Farmer had skull spinal fusion surgery, which had increased her mobility significantly. However, she still has quite a bit of recovery ahead. While on the road to recovery, after her surgery, her aunt, who originally owned the business, The Blooming Goat, suggested she learn how to make soap for something to do. 5 years later, her aunt has since retired and Farmer owns the business she started. Farmer's products are sold online, at Brawlham's in Rigby, and at the Idaho Falls Farmers Market. These have been your BYU-Idaho Radio morning headlines for May 15th, 2025. Thanks for tuning in. More news, interviews, and great content are available on our podcast feed. Search for BYU-Idaho Radio on your favorite podcast apps. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and more. You can also ask your smart speakers to play KBYI 94.3 FM. Have a great day. This is BYU-Idaho Radio, and I'm Jill Clary.